In the mid-1990s, Philippa and Shirley used their knowledge of garment construction and sewing, in addition to felt making, to piece together this version of a stockman's coat, when other felt makers were making garments all in one piece with no cutting or sewing. It was exhibited in Classy Clobber, held at Treadle's Gallery in Kingston in 1998. It depicts station life in Australia and is made with locally produced wool in colours of the Australian landscape. The coat is lined and extremely heavy in contrast to modern felt garments. This jacket was made in 1993 with 27-micron dyed wool. The wool came from the Goulburn Wool Processors, one of only a few suppliers of dyed wool fibre at the time. My design was for a semi-tailored felt jacket with a wide shawl collar. Before felting with a bamboo blind, the dark green wool fibre was decorated with multicoloured motifs made by adding wool fibres I had dyed myself. The edge is finished with matching Thai silk fabric bias binding. This very warm jacket was created for a fashion parade at the Goulburn Regional Art Gallery. These brooches were made using the upwoofing technique, which is a process invented by Irene van der Wulf of the Netherlands. It is a way to create three-dimensional surface designs on wet felting. To create upwoofing, you introduce wool strips or pre-felt into the holes of a specialist mat which makes buds of felt. The buds create a unique bobble-like soft texture which can be used in brooches or articles of clothing. I have expanded on the upwoofing techniques by incorporating central design to the bobbles. I learned to make felt at the first National Fibre Conference in Melbourne in 1980. I joined CRF in 1996. When Polly Sterling came to Canberra, I attended a workshop to learn to make Nuno felt. I made this Nuno vest in one piece, using silk fabric and wool. Small objects are trapped beneath the silk as an interesting design feature. This cloak was made from merino wool and kid mohair on cotton voile. It was felted in 1998. This piece is one of a group of 7 felted hangings about 280 centimetres long that reflected the dappled light and shadows in a forest of gum trees. I first created this spiral felt technique in early 2004 and further developed it for this textile exhibition piece in 2008. This particular hanging combined various natural brown wool, alpaca, bamboo and silk fibres with natural coloured wool yarns that were felted, handspun and woven. This red vest was my first piece using the Nuno technique of felting, which was introduced by Australian artist Polly Sterling. Nuno is the Japanese word for cloth. A thin cloth is covered or sparsely covered by a thin layer of wool. Sometimes areas are deliberately left uncovered by wool. My piece is light but warm to wear and the colours are vibrant. Since I learned this technique in 2007, I've used it to make several items. This hat was made using white alpaca fleece with a trim of Chinese brocade in a fan shape and stainless steel chopsticks. This cloche won the 2013 Group Champion section of the Royal Canberra Show. It reminds me of Japan, geishas, beautiful people and ornate fabrics. In 2014, I attended a workshop by felt artist Sachiko Kotaka, organised by CRF. I was introduced to the artist's techniques of otakiri and calamari felt. This reversible circular wrap is a pastiche of orakiri shapes resembling cinnabar crystals. Other techniques, including calamari, plaiting, weaving and embellishing with glass beads, have also been incorporated. The skin on the outside, soft on the inside, held together by an infinite network of fibres, complex and strong, yet fragile and easily torn apart. A quote from Martine van Zuylen, a felt maker and tutor from Western Australia. Making a hand-felted circular mandala is a process of creating a unified felt piece by working in stages, both in design and actual felting, attending to and making the most of ways in which the individual components, various colours, surface textures and fibres come together to form a whole. This scarf was made in 2014 using a technique perfected by Leiko Yukiyama known as pine needle felt. The technique involves stripping fine slivers from wool roving and placing each piece into a design. The closer the pine needles, the denser the effect. In essence, it is drawing with wool. It is very free form and not anchored by fabric, which makes it very challenging to manage. It took 3 months to complete. I think it was about 27 when I made my first garment, this coat. The things I didn't know about felting were legion, as it was in the relatively early days of my felting, so I was delighted it worked. It became the centrepiece for a very small exhibition as Artist of the Month for Goulburn and District Arts and Crafts, now better known as Gallery on Track. Its construction involved cutting 5 metres of cheesecloth into random shapes, felting it with merino wool and embellishing with other fibres. On the cuffs is the CSIRO's silky wool, a relatively new innovation at the time. I made this garment in a workshop taught by Fiona Duffy. The whole garment was felted in one piece on white patch silk. The jacket shows the application of many skills, including the unique way of laying out the merino wool to provide stretch over the bust line, use of pre-felts in design, and the use of Japanese ink in brushstrokes over the completely finished jacket. I made this piece following the December 2001 bushfires. I started it in a workshop taught by a visiting felt artist from the United Kingdom, Jeanette Appleton, in 2002, but it was not finished until a later time. Molly the sheep is made from hand-dyed and felted wool, which has been cut into strips. Rug hooking techniques have been used to create this entry for an exhibition at the CSIRO. She was made as a protest in response to Australian live sheep exports. An anemone's symbiotic relationship with green algae, an exchange of oxygen and energy for protein and sunlight. We cannot live in isolation. This scarf is one of a series of minimal soft merino scarves made in 2013 with pre-dyed needle felt. I made these thin scarves in various colours with a 3-dimensional pleated structure. I first shibori dyed some of the needle felted strips prior to felting them together. I made this 3-sided pyramid bag 15 years ago as an homage to the wonderful greens of the native bush of my New Zealand homeland. The decorations include New Zealand flax, a punga tree fern, some pieces of pua shell held in place by black net, and a nickel palm. This pyramid bag won first and champion certificates in the Royal Canberra Show 2006. This is an experimental piece made using a large French knitting implement. The coil was stuffed with pre-felts and wool tops, and the coils stitched into position. Helen Cox writes, "I've owned this piece for several years and love it as much now as when I acquired it. There are many talented feltmakers in this group. I proposed this piece for the retrospective because I think it deserves another showing. It is unique and striking and is a timeless piece in my wardrobe." In 2002, I did a workshop at CRF with a visiting felt artist from the UK, Jeanette Appleton. She taught us various techniques for the surface decoration of our felt, including cutting up different coloured pieces of pre-felt and joining them together like patchwork with different types of thread and wool and yarn. Some of the samples were so fabulous, I framed them. In 2017, I made this scarf at a Pam Hovell Nuno Felted Botanical Print Scarf workshop. I used a dye that represented Australia, and I used only native plant leaves as my pattern. At the time of making the scarf, I lived in hope that one day the rules stopping New Zealanders from becoming Australian citizens would change. I made a promise to myself that I would not wear it until I attended my Australian citizenship ceremony. In February 2020, I wore my scarf with great pride at an Australian citizenship ceremony. It was a very emotional and special occasion.